Today, we're going to be presenting on providing cultural sensitive PBS to families. It's very great to be able to present right after Joe because it is a nice flow into our topic today as well. Today, we're going to be providing more anecdotal examples from our own experiences working with a variety of families from different cultural backgrounds in Vancouver, and some of our own personal examples as well. We want to talk about how to work with families and using a cultural sensitive lens and how to implement some of these strategies that we're talking about. So those examples will come later on in their presentation. Okay, so why is it important to be talking about culturally sensitive PBS? Again, there's a huge growing diversity in our Lower Mainland. Just by walking down the streets of Vancouver, you see so many different faces. And so I think this is really, really important. As Joe mentioned earlier, families' goals, values, and parenting practices are heavily influenced by a variety of their cultural dimensions and their own, where they come from. When we talk about culture today, we're going to be specifically referring to, in terms of our presentation, ethnicity, nationality, primary language spoken, and religion. However, if you look into culture, culture can also be referring to sexual orientation, gender identification, socioeconomic status, and political views. However, just in terms of our presentation today, we're not necessarily referring to those. We'll be discussing these four main features of culture. To be honest, I don't know if there is a lot of research or any research out there that addresses these other aspects of culture like sexual orientation and gender identification when implementing PBS. So I think that's a huge area that hasn't been tapped into yet. And again, Joe mentioned there still isn't very much research coming out in terms of these areas of culture and how that affects working with families when we're implementing PBS as well. Okay, this is just a simple graph. This is the cultural diverse communities in the Lower Mainland. If you can see, English is 56% of the population reported that English was their primary language spoken at home. Surprisingly, French, individuals that speak French as a primary language at home is only 1.1%, and the remainder of 40.3% reported that they speak a non-official language at home. So that's a huge portion of the population here living in the Lower Mainland. This next graph, we took that 40.3% that was reported that non-official language was the language spoken at home, and we broke it down to the top 10 common languages spoken at home. There's Punjabi, Cantonese, Chinese, NOS. I think that stands for Chinese non-otherwise specified, so that could include a lot of the different dialects that are spoken in China. Mandarin, Tagalog, Korean, Persian, Spanish, German, and Hindi. So that's a wide range that we've got. And this is the next interesting one. These are how insufficient our services are. So we took some of those top primary languages spoken, and we've calculated the number of children diagnosed with ASD based on their primary language spoken at home. You can see there's a lot. And these are actually the number of board BCBAs that are listed on the Registered Service Providers list that state that they speak a second language. There's a huge need. And I don't have any numbers for the schools or the other educators, but I'm pretty sure that there is a big gap as well in the school system. So for us as professionals working out in the community and supporting families, there's a high chance that we're going to be working with families from different cultural backgrounds. That's going to happen. So talking about this stuff and having a venue to discuss this, I think is really, really important, especially moving on with the diversity that we have in the Lower Mainland. Joe mentioned this a little bit as well, but I wanted to bring this up again because I think this is very, very important. While we want to talk about culturally responsive PBS, it's really important to also think that, it's really important that we gain knowledge and we seek knowledge, but it's really important not to assume just based on how they look or the language they speak or based on their religion or where they're from about the values they hold. Noreen was mentioning that there might be second generation, first generation, right? So
yeah, and even we were talking to another BCBA earlier during the break. We were talking about this concept of, I think, 1.5 generations. So everybody's a little bit different. I'm a first generation immigrant. My cultural beliefs could be very different from a third generation immigrant, right? So we have to remember that some families actually have multiple cultures within one family. My culture and my husband's culture is different. So within our family, our daughter is living with two different cultures. So we have to remember that our community is so diverse.
Right, and then that brings up another extra layer of complexity when we're trying to serve these families. You have to be aware of all of that piece. And then you have to be aware, if you have a mixed family, you have two parents from two different cultural backgrounds, their expectation for their child's behavior may be different. Their practices for teaching and raising their child might be different as well. So to be cognizant of that is very key. Also, when we look at a family, we want to look at each family, as Joe mentioned, as a unique family. When I talk and discuss about a child with autism, yes, the child has autism, but he or she is an individual. So it's key that we look at that child's interest, their strengths, their needs. Those are unique for him or her. So when we look at a family, when we look at a family unit, we have to look at the uniqueness of that family as well, not assume that because they're from a certain culture that this is probably a value that they have. And that takes time and it takes rapport to develop that relationship and to get that information. Okay, I wanted to go briefly over some of the key features of PBS. A lot of this has been discussed, but I think it's important because a lot of the next couple of slides that we do present are based on some of these features and how we can look at these features of PBS through a culturally sensitive lens. So some of the key features is collaborative partnership, meaning we want to commit ourselves to develop collaborative partnership with the families, professionals, with the educators, and that we're all on the same page and that we're all working towards the same goal. Family-centered principles. Family-centered principles are, just to name a few, build on family strengths and capacities, employ competency-enhancing and empowering practices. 3 is mobilize informal and formal supports and resources that are available to that family. And the other one is provide PBS in a very flexible and responsive manner. So those are very important. You can see how cultural responsiveness fits very well with that family-centered kind of principle as well. Looking at meaningful lifestyle outcomes, this one's mentioned over again as well, but the goal for PBS is to increase that child and the family's quality of life. So when we're coming up with goals within a routine, it's very important to focus on these things. The process of functional assessment and having a multi-component PBS plan, and also discussing contextual fit. So contextual fit means supports that are congruent with the child, the implementer, and the setting. So you can have a very technically sound, grounded PBS plan that looks great on a piece of paper, but if that isn't a good fit with your family, and if it doesn't work within their routine, it's not addressing their expectations, and it's not addressing what they find important as a family in terms of quality of life, that PBS plan may not even get implemented. Or it might get implemented haphazardly, and so it's not going to be effective. Or 3, it might get implemented in a short time, but it isn't something that they can maintain across months. So really, are we making a difference in their quality of life? No. So everything we talk about today really refers back to this contextual fit piece. Finally, one of the key features of PBS would be presenting it within an activity setting as a unit of analysis, meaning we want to look at routines again that are meaningful for the family. Need implementation support, continuous evaluation, and finally support with humility. And when we talk about supporting with humility, we want to think about truly listening to the families, validating emotions and their experiences, being responsive to the parents' needs, admitting sometimes we don't know and that we need to go and get that information, and also correcting our errors and encouraging parents to make decisions with us, encouraging parents to start solving problems with us, and when they start feeling empowered and confident, start taking the lead when implementing PBS strategies.